All right. So my number two is little known movie called The Graduate from 1967, directed by the great Mike Nichols, starring Dustin Hoffman, Anne Bancroft, Catherine Ross. So I put this movie on my list because this movie kind of represents what I was touching on earlier, sort of the angst and sort of this feeling of way too much time on your hand feeling and what to do with myself feeling that summer brings. I'm not very good with that.
Mm.
I need some sense of boundary and structure, and I've become better with this as I've grown older for sure. But even now, if I have like 3 days off and I'm just sitting at home and doing, I don't know, tasks and projects and what have you, by the end of the third day I will be as a messed up crazy person for sure. I don't know why that is. I need some
Uh-huh.
sort of structure to my life, and this is what this movie represents to me. Also a little bit of kind of summer parties, with people that you don't really know and you don't want to really hang out with them, and those earlier scenes of how he's sort of shoved around and paraded around, with the parents' friends
Mm.
and such. It
Hmm.
sort of reminds me of that. There were lots of summer parties I remember growing up, either through dad's army stuff or when
Hmm.
we would be back in Delhi, we would be meeting, other random relatives, like not my aunts and grandparents
Uh-huh.
who were sort of the close family, but these are like second, third cousins who I have no real connection with. I hope they're not listening to this podcast, but if you
I
are,
hope
oh
they
my
are. Yeah.
gosh.
Good shout out to them. It's a positive thing. Shout out. Yeah.
So it reminds me of that kind of a little bit, but then it also reminds me of, or associate my association with sort of, there's something seductive and hot about the summer too. It sort of brings out repressed feelings or what have you that you may be harboring, and it brings those out and gives them some light, because there is that sense of freedom and anything is possible in the summertime. I have not had a Mrs. Robinson episode in my life,
Yet.
putting that out there
Yet.
yet. Yeah, I guess now I would be playing Mrs.
That was my
Robinson.
implication. Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think there's something about that. And then, also this sense of FOMO that comes in a little bit, because there's so much to do in the summer. Apparently, people are always doing stuff, and people like me who are not big summer people, who often say no to stuff but then
Mm.
are checking their feed out and just thinking about, oh shit, I probably should have said a yes to that thing, and now they're on the yacht or on the boat or whatever, and I'm just here watching, I don't know, Ingrid Bergman at 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That's sort of sad. But then I think it's those feelings that this movie represents for me. The movie, I mean, what can I say about The Graduate that hasn't been said? So, I'll just keep it really brief. I mean, this is a masterpiece in every department.
Yep.
Watch it again this time. I've seen it many, many times before, but I don't think there is a movie that puts you in the point of view of its character as much as this movie does.
Hmm.
You really feel every beat of anxiety and angst and horniness or what have you that comes with this character, which is incredible. And the one scene that really, I guess I'd never noticed that scene before, or maybe I did, but that really struck me was the first time he sees Mrs. Robinson naked.
Hmm.
She
The fast
flashes off
cuts.
her body.
Yeah.
I was so mesmerized by that. I don't know how I missed that scene earlier. I'm sure people are like vomiting hearing this, because there are probably essays and theses on that scene
Yeah.
out there. But that's just the kind of stuff Mike Nichol does. I mean, this to me is like the perfect blend of performance, writing, filmmaking flourishes that
Hmm.
actually elevate everything. You don't have to be making a science fiction epic to have filmmaking flourishes. You can have those in telling a human story, which is my favorite kind of movie anyway.
Hmm.
So, and that's what this movie is. So, yeah, The Graduate, number two.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo everything you said. Just in terms of the film as a film, it's one of my favorite movies. Saw it in high school and has loved it ever
Oh,
since then. And it's yeah, it's also, I think this movie could have come up at multiple of our past episodes in terms of the different
oh yeah.
topics. There's so many layers to this movie. I mean, I could have included it in a lot of different ones. So I just echo everything you said about this movie being a masterpiece. I mean, I think it's got one of the best endings of any movie that has ever been made too. It just really, really hits me.
Totally.
In terms of the summer thing, it's interesting that, like, because this movie definitely is the theme of this Hoffman's character is directionless. He's getting all these pressures. He just graduated. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And that you associated that angst with summer, whereas like for me it was sort of the opposite of like this was the summer where I could not have those pressures anymore because oh, it's the summer, like let's just not think about anything else and just enjoy these 3 months. Because yeah, I get this whole movie is around like what do you do with your life, and he is directionless, then he falls in love, and his whole point is like now he all of a sudden then he becomes activated, right? And he has a meaning to his life, and he's trying to pursue this girl, and then he gets her, and then he's still directionless.
Yeah,
which is just the brilliant thing about this film too. That it's like, yeah, you can have a goal. Even if you accomplish that goal, it doesn't necessarily solve this itch of like, well, what am I doing with my life?
right.
What is the point of all of this? Like, I think those things do never go away. Maybe it lessens at various points in your life. Like you don't think about it as much, but I think that's part of what life is just
Totally.
exploring all those different reasons reasons for why we're here, what to do with the life. But yeah, in terms of filmmaking, like all the illusions of or him floating in the water, and that again signaling the directionless. And another cut that's just one of my favorite edits in all of film, when he jumps onto the raft, and then it just cuts to him jumping onto Mrs. Robinson in the bedroom. I see that it's one of those things is coming, and then it just like blows my hair back every time, just how amazing that edit is. This movie is just so well done. All the POV shots too, you mentioned, puts you really in the mind of the character, especially when he's in the scuba suit and you're seeing like
so good.
Everyone sort of where he feels just disconnected from all these people trying to tell him what to do and talk to him, but he can't really hear them.
And claustrophobic.
You can't hear them either. And it's that claustrophobia of expectations just being put on you. It's just a fantastic film.
Yeah, it's a shame to even put it on a number 2 on any list, but it's a specific topic.
No, sure.
On number 2. But on the summer point, I think for me it's been the opposite, because there's so much time to think about things in the summer because there isn't much going on. And like I said, I don't do very well with just lollygagging and languishing. And this is why this always brings up, because usually summers are, growing up, they were about, oh, you're going to go back to school. What happens then? And you're preparing for that, or it's the time right before you go to grad school, or usually some big project or something else is going to kick up at work right after the summer. So I'm already thinking about that shit. I shouldn't be.
Yeah, you got to live in the moment.
Exactly, which is I have to remind myself to do that. So yeah, I think that's why this movie represents that. And
okay.
And then sort of and I said this earlier, but like to me, the metaphor of the ending is a little bit of also summary, where you have this great FOMO about what party to go to, or what romance to have, or whatever summary thing you want to be doing. But once you achieve them, you're still kind of empty in a way. And, what was all this running around really even for? And it's okay. I mean, it's the summer. It doesn't have to mean much. And that's the point. But I think for me, it was always about when I put myself out there to seek these experiences, at the end of the day, I still had those same anxieties and same question marks about going back to the real life, which this movie also represents, of course, in a different way. But yeah. And then I guess the imagery of the movie, like you were saying, whenever I think of summer through movies, I always think of him kind of floating away on that pool. It's embedded in my head, aimless, directionless, but it's still nice because the pool is great and it looks good and the sun is shining and the people who seemingly love you are around you. So it's sort of that dichotomy, if you will, of summer.
Yeah, it's like he's using the metaphor for water and the pool, kind of flipping it a little bit. Instead of being relaxing, it's sort of numbing. And they've, even in the last movie you discussed too, in Ferris, I believe there's a Graduate reference to the pool scene. Rushmore references that. I mean, it's a famous metaphor for sort of being lost and a little aimless. And, again, I think this just speaks to the power of this movie, that decades later, it's still a reference that if you play some Simon and Garfunkel and see someone floating in a pool, they're like, oh, that's
exactly.
The Graduate. Like that is how, like, Mike Nichols is just a visual filmmaker, one of my favorites. And this movie, I think, just shows that in terms of how some of those shots, and two, the driving sequences, some of my favorite scenes too, when he's driving up to San Francisco and they're just playing that Simon and Garfunkel, and the way that he just captures the hills of like Northern California, and you're just feeling what the character's going through, is just some of my favorite sequences of the movie too. And there's a lot of those allusions in other films, even up to this point now, of a character sort of kind of a little bit lost in driving as a metaphor, using a soundtrack behind is just fantastic.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.